addition to VA investigations for restoration. The bill also provides a separate appeals process created for schools who want to challenge the repayment determinations. And it includes an explicit fraud definition. It defines fraud as including false, misleading, and deceptive acts. We have more work to do to protect our veterans from bad faith actors and make certain that they have every single opportunity to live a meaningful, thriving, and joyful life post-service, and this bill gets us closer to that. Thank you to all of my colleagues in this committee, to the ranking member, to the chairman for your support last Congress, and I look forward to getting this bill past this Congress out of the House, then the Senate, and signed to law, and I look forward to working with every one of you to make that happen. Thank you, Chairman. I yield back.
I also look forward to it passing as well. I would like at this time to welcome our first panel. If everyone would please come to the front. Testifying before us today, we have Miss Beth Murphy, Acting Principal Deputy Undersecretary for Benefits at the Veterans Benefit Administration for the U.S. Department of Affairs. She is accompanied by Miss Tracy Thurt, is that correct? Chief Human Capital Officer at the Office of Human Resources and Administration Operation, Security and Preparedness for the Department of Veterans Affairs. Does that fit on a business card? That's pretty long. And Dr. Sheshin Yende, and Chief Medical Officer in Integrated Veterans Care at the Veterans Health Administration for the Department of Veterans Affairs. I ask the witnesses to please stand and raise their right hands. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to provide is the truth and the whole truth and nothing but the truth? Thank you, and let the record reflect that the witnesses have answered in the affirmative. Ms. Murphy, hi. I now recognize you for 5 minutes for your testimony.
Good afternoon, Chairman Bost, Ranking Member Takano, and members of the committee. Thank you for the invitation to present our views on pending legislation that would affect Department of Veterans Affairs programs and services. Accompanying me today is Ms. Tracy Theret, Chief Human Capital Officer, Office of Human Resources and Administration Operations, Security and Preparedness, Dr. Sanchin Yendi, Chief Medical Officer for VHA's Integrated Veterans Care. VA offers support for much of the proposed legislation before us today. First, VA supports H.R. 1391, the Student Veterans Benefit Restoration Act, which would restore VA education benefits for veterans affected by deceptive educational institution practices. VA believes the institution, not the students, should repay all covered assistance, including payments directly to students. To ensure this, VA recommends amending the bill to require institutions to reimburse both direct student payments and tuition funds received from VA, preventing veterans from bearing the burden of repayment. VA also supports H.R. 1041, the Second Amendment Protection Act, and the unnamed Second Amendment bill, but also notes risks with both aspects of the bills. VA has continuously complied with all legal reporting requirements to the Department of Justice for recording individuals on the National Instant Criminal Background Check System, or NICS. When VA determines a veteran unable to manage their affairs, H.R. 1041 would require an evaluative consideration in addition to a VA incompetency decision to determine whether the veteran's mental capacity warrants NICS reporting. Additionally, VA notes that H.R. 1041 would neither remove nor amend DOJ's policies and procedures when enforcing the Brady Handgun Violence Protection Act. DOJ defines mental defective as any individual who lacks the mental capacity to contract or manage their own affairs. To avoid putting the veteran at risk of facing criminal liability when purchasing a firearm, VA recommends including legislative language that would clearly exempt an individual deemed incompetent for purposes of the VA fiduciary program from being considered a mental defective as defined by DOJ. However, I want to make it clear, Mr. Chairman, that if passed, VA will continue to comply with federal law and implement both bills as written. VA does wish to note that we continue to take veteran suicide prevention extremely seriously. One example of our efforts is that effective February 14th, 2025, VA, in collaboration with Veterans Health Administration, requires the distribution of 2 new fact sheets on gun safety storage and suicide awareness to prospective fiduciaries during the appointment process, reinforcing VA's commitment to veteran safety. VA also supports H.R. 472, the Restore Accountability Act of 2025, with amendments to strengthen its disciplinary authorities. Legal challenges to the VA Accountability Act have weakened its distinction with existing laws, prompting VA to advocate for modifications to 38 U.S. Code Sections 712, 713, and 714 to enhance accountability, reduce litigation risk, and ensure disciplinary actions stand. VA welcomes the opportunity to engage in technical assistance to address these issues. VA will continue to take disciplinary action under applicable existing authorities, providing certainty and minimizing legal risk to VA while working with Congress to address the legal risks identified in the draft bill. Finally, VA strongly supports the intent of H.R. 740, the Veterans Access Act of 2025 proposed by Chairman Bost, which directly aligns with Secretary Collins' focus on providing timely care for eligible veterans. The bill would codify VA's access standards, strengthen referral processes, and expand options for mental health residential rehab care. It also establishes a standardized screening process for residential mental health care and requires real-time wait times tracking across facilities. VA is steadfast in its commitment to refining processes, strengthening provider networks, and working with Congress to ensure timely care for veterans. We appreciate the committee's leadership and look forward to advancing these and similar solutions that prioritize veterans. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my statement. Thank you again for the opportunity to discuss this important legislation to improve benefits and services for veterans, service members, and their families. My colleagues and I would be glad to answer any questions you or the other members of the committee may have.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. We appreciate your testimony. So we're going to go to questions. Ms. Murphy, and I only need a yes or no answer. Other versions of the discussion draft would, on the bill requiring us to no longer return to next list, those who are seeking a fiduciary. Other drafts would, for the VA notification, would notify the Attorney General that all VA prior reports of the veteran to the next list was, quote, improper. Do these other bills put Trump administration and VA at risk of being sued, including for possible reparations?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I also need a yes or no answer once Consolidation Appropriations Act of 2024 and the subsequent continuing resolutions expire. Will VA resume reporting VA with fiduciary to NICS unless Congress passes the permanent solution?
We would follow the law that was applicable, so if it expired, yes, we would follow the law in effect at the time.
Ms. Thera, why are the authorities in the Accountability Act necessary for VA to be able to hold its employees accountable?
Chairman Bost, the authorities in the Restore Accountability Act will help us to hold our employees to a higher performance standard as well as a higher standard of conduct, and that is good for serving veterans.
Dr. Yandy, what are VA's current policies when veterans are seeking administration to residential rehabilitation treatment programs?
Chairman Bost, the current policy is if a veteran needs priority care, that should be provided within 72 hours. And if it's a non-priority care for RRTP programs, it should be provided within 30 days.
Can you tell me how you think that my bill for Veterans Access Act would improve access for veterans seeking substance abuse treatment?
Chairman Boss, we are supportive of this legislation. We already are making some changes in our policies and procedures, and we would require some minor tweaks where we would change the priority admission threshold from 72 hours to 48 hours, and the 30-day threshold to 20 days. Additionally, there will be a requirement for screening. We have already started working on those screening measures by standardizing our screening procedures at the VISN level. So I think what is in the Access Act, we have already started taking some steps towards that direction, and we believe it will help in providing timely access to veterans.
Thank you. Ms. Murphy, once again, yes or no answer. Do you believe that every veteran with a fiduciary is automatically a danger to themselves and others?
To answer that.
Wait. You're not able to answer whether you believe if a fiduciary is provided for a veteran, whether they are automatically a danger to themselves or others.
If a fiduciary is provided, that fiduciary takes care of their
What?
VA funds,
Their financial
their
needs.
financial needs. If you're using the word automatically, then I would say no.
Okay. Dr. Yende, over the last month, this committee has conducted several oversight hearings focused on community care. Our witnesses have included VA program administrators and providers, but most importantly, veterans. Under Secretary Collins, how is VA planning to ensure veterans can get the care, including community care, that they've earned?
Chairman Bost, we believe community care is VA care, and we would make sure that when a veteran is eligible and desires community care, veterans should be provided access to community care. And so we are working, as Secretary Collins has said, in making sure that veterans have earned their access to community care, and will take the steps to make sure that happens.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. I have one more question, and I know that you're probably not going to answer, but I'm going to put it on the record anyway. Do you believe that it is right for those people who have fought and died, many of them physically disabled for life in many ways, that seek care from the VA, should have every due process under the law that someone who has not receives?
I believe that we, as part of our VA responsibilities, have to administer all the due process that is required.
Okay,
It's under our
maybe I should ask this. Who, you believe, I apologize.
It's all right, sir.
By golly, I normally have to stand up and position
Sounds
attention to that.
inspirational, for
So let me ask this. Do you believe that the VA it has the authority to give due process
Regarding VA benefits and services, yes.
regarding their constitutional rights?
We, as part of our due process, provide information, in this case regarding the Brady Bill, information that would be helpful to the potential beneficiary, the potential individual covered by the fiduciary program, so they are aware of the rights. So we provide information.
Well, first off, let me say that I believe that every other person in this United States, besides veterans, has the right to go before a judge to make that decision to offer them due process. That's why I carry this bill and why we're going to push hard to make sure that bill passed. With that, my time has expired, and I yield to the ranking member for his questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Theret, your title at VA is Chief Human Capital Officer, is that correct?
That is correct, Ranking Member
Thank you.
Takano.
Can you tell me how many VA employees have been terminated since January 2025?
Approximately 1,400 employees have been terminated during their probationary period.
Can you speak up? I can't hear you too well.
Sorry, Ranking Member Takano, approximately 1,400 employees have been terminated during their probationary period.
Thank you for that. Who in your chain of command ordered you to carry out these terminations?
Ranking Member Takano, I'm happy to take questions about the termination of employees during their probationary period for the record. Today, my focus is on the legislation, the
Well,
Restore
Madam,
Accountability Act.
please stop. The Restore VA Accountability Act changes the authorities VA has to terminate employees, right?
The Restore Accountability Act.
Just answer my
is-
question. The Restore VA Accountability Act changes the authorities VA has to terminate employees, right?
Ranking Member Takano.
I'm
gives
establishing the
us
germaneness of my
additional
questions to
authorities.
you. So
Understood.
please answer my questions. Who in the chain of your command ordered you to carry out these terminations?
I used the authorities within the Code of Federal Regulations.
So nobody ordered you to carry out these terminations? You did it on your own?
There was direction from the Office of Personnel Management.
So there was a director from OPM instructed you. Who in that office instructed you?
Sir, I'm happy to take these questions.
So you're refusing to answer the question. Were leaders in the VA offices that these employees worked in notified prior or even after their termination?
Sir, I'm happy to take
So
questions.
you're non-responsive. Many VA program officers still do not know who from their ranks were terminated. Was the decision to terminate these employees made outside of VA?
Ranking Member Takano, I'm happy to answer the questions for the record.
For the record, so you will answer it later? Is what you're telling me?
I will, sir.
Thank you. How many VA employees did you terminate on the night of February 13th, 2025?
Ranking Member Takano, as I mentioned, approximately 1,400 employees have been terminated during their probationary period.
Okay, but you can't tell me on February 13th, 2025.
I will provide that
Thank you.
information for the record.
How many VA employees did you terminate yesterday?
Ranking Member Takano, approximately 1,400 employees were terminated during their probationary period. I can provide the information requested for
Okay.
the record.
Thank you. I have a poster that shows the memo that you wrote and sent to the employees that were terminated. Did you write and sign this memo?
Ranking Member Takano, that is my signature on that letter.
And you wrote and signed the memo?
It is my signature on the letter.
Did you write the memo?
The memo was provided.
So you didn't write it. It was provided to you by someone else.
The memo was provided for.
And you're not going
my
to tell me who
signature.
provided you with the memo.
Ranking Member Takano, I'm happy.
But your name is on the memo.
I am happy to
Okay,
take the
did you
question
personally
for the record.
determine and verify which probationary employees to terminate?
Ranking Member Takano, happy to take that question for the record.
Okay. So right here, you wrote that based on this employee's termination, that you based this employee's termination on their performance. Did you verify that each terminated employee had been evaluated for their performance?
Ranking Member Takano, I will answer your questions for the record.
Did every probationary employee who was terminated have performance issues?
Ranking Member Takano, I'm happy to answer your
So you
question.
can't answer that question, though you sent this memo out and it resulted in their termination.
At today's hearing, I am prepared to talk about the Restore
Okay.
Accountability Act.
Ms. Derritt, my staff has now heard from many of the people who were fired, and we know that many had stellar performance records, which directly contradicts the memo you sent out. Did you do your due diligence before you sent this memo out and assure yourself that everything in this memo was true?
Ranking Member Takano, I'm happy to take your
So
question.
you
for
just
the
sent
record.
this memo out, and whether or not you're going to fire an employee based on their performance, but you didn't do the due diligence yourself to make sure that this memo was true.
I am happy to take the question and provide that
So
information
the answer
for
is
the record.
no. It's not just that you're happy to take my question. The acting U.S. attorney in New York decided that she would resign before engaging in a quid pro quo that violated the oath she took. Did you take an oath to do the job you're doing now?
Ranking Member Takano, every federal employee.
Okay,
takes
thank
an
you.
oath
So
when they
yes, the
enter
answer is
their
yes.
position.
Do you believe that terminating these employees and lying about the reason why was a violation of that oath?
Ranking Member Takano, I am supporting the decision that was made.
So you supported the decision, and you sent out memos without knowing whether or not their performance actually justified their termination.
Ranking Member Takano, I am happy to answer questions
So,
regarding.
madam,
determination.
at what point would you resign rather than follow an instruction from a superior?
Ranking Member Takano.
Does it not weigh on your conscience that somebody's livelihood was terminated and you didn't do the due diligence to find out whether this memo was in fact true?
Ranking Member Takano, if any employee is concerned.
Just look at the veterans that are sitting behind you, ma'am. You fired these people.
The gentleman's time has expired. Representative King Hines, you're recognized.
We got 99 problems in the Veterans Administration, and I'm a new member, and I've seen multiple reports, both from the GAO and the IG, laying out what the issues are and all this work that needs to be done with regards to providing the access to the care that veterans rightfully deserve. So I want to reshift our focus to the policy at hand. And for me, in my district, the issue is access. And the manner in which we've been having the conversation with regards to access is one or the other proposition, right? Whether we should just put all the money with regards to the VA or expand to community care services. I'm looking for a win-win. So how do we, and I don't think, right, when you're looking at communities like mine where access is an issue, you can't just get in a car and drive. This is very, this is an issue for rural communities as well. How do we balance and optimize basically having those two complement each other so that we ensure that veterans who live in remote rural areas actually have access?
Thank you for the question. Dr. Braverman and I testified a couple of weeks ago. We completely understand that in places like the Pacific Islands and Alaska, we'll have to come up with some innovative solutions given challenges with access in those areas. We actually worked recently with Vision 21 that covers your area, put together a brief report outlining access both through VA direct care system as well as the community care system. And as Mr. McIntyre from Tri-West testified, we are also working with our third-party administrators. So I will make sure we'll provide you that summary. I think it is already on its way, but I will personally make sure we provide you with a detailed summary of how we can ensure access in your area.
I'd appreciate that, because some of the conversations that we're having seems or sounds like a first world problem to me, when the issue really is just, can we get some service? So looking forward to that report. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Yield my time. Thanks.
Representative Brzezinski, you are recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Bost and Ranking Member Takano, for this hearing, and thank you to the witnesses for your time. I have strong concerns about several of the bills up for consideration today, but most notably H.R. 472, the Restore VA Accountability Act. We have seen, as Ranking Member Takano discussed, the mass firings across the federal government, but specifically those 1,400 VA staff that were fired just last night. That's a total of actually at least 2,400 employees let go at the VA headquarters, and that isn't accounting for those who have taken the so-called fork-in-the-road leave package. I want to note I have the privilege of serving as the ranking member on the subcommittee on tech modernization. We held our first hearing yesterday regarding the ongoing rollout of the electronic health record system. And at a time when we need to be recruiting and retaining staff for major projects like EHRM that has really struggled to catch fire and get off the ground, it troubles me that as a part of that hearing, it was acknowledged that some of these firings were actually within the EHRM program, creating potentially further struggles for the program, being further short-staffed. I want to point out that veterans make up approximately 30% of the federal workforce. So not only is this administration firing thousands of employees who provide crucial service to our vets, they are also firing thousands of veteran employees themselves. I have also heard directly from veteran employees in my district who were unjustifiably terminated. I believe in staff accountability, especially when it comes to those providing services for our veterans, but it must be done in a just and fair manner. VA officials themselves have communicated to the committee that they do not need additional authorities to hold employees accountable. When the Restore VA Accountability Act was considered by this committee last Congress, I offered an amendment that would have stricken provisions of this bill that explicitly superseded collective bargaining agreements made with VA employee unions with respect to disciplinary procedures. I noted at the time that more than 79% of VA's workforce are bargaining unit employees. Procedures outlined in VA's collective bargaining agreements have been agreed upon after extensive negotiations between unions and management. To enact legislation that would simply throw out these contracts out the window, I think is cruel and unfair, given that the parties negotiated these agreements under the law at the time. When Congress passes new laws, it is customary for labor and management to return to the bargaining table to incorporate those new laws into VA's collective bargaining agreements, not for Congress to unilaterally deny the workforce that right. Specifying in this bill that any collective bargaining agreements must be superseded is anti-union and anti-worker, and it is just that simple. So my question is, Ms. Therrett, my question for you is that if instead of tossing out collective bargaining agreements and beyond any mass firings of the VA workers, would it not be more efficient and cost-effective to simply improve training for HR employees and frontline supervisors on how to properly and effectively discipline employees under Title V, and especially when compared to attempting to pass a law that has proved unconstitutional in the past and will almost certainly be litigated?
We have recognized that the Restore Accountability would require some modifications and some rigorous technical review working with the committee. I think two things that we have been steadfast in is that we're always looking to improve, whether it's improving the training, whether it's improving the processes, whether it's improving the timelines that we have to propose, decide, and finalize an action. So the bill offers a lot of those opportunities for us to improve our accountability when it comes to performance and conduct. The other component is that we want to make sure that any actions that we take are legally defensible. We don't want to have to reinstate employees. We don't want to have to reverse actions that we've taken. So the sections that you reference with respect to collective bargaining, with respect to opportunities to improve in our views on the bill, we do look forward to working with the committee to make sure that language in those sections is sufficient enough for us to be able to learn from some of the challenges that we've had in the past and still be able to hold our employees to high levels of performance and conduct. And whether it's in the investigative process, in the training process, in the execution of these authorities, that we're able to do what the committee expects of us, which is to hold our employees to a high standard and keep the veteran at the center of all that we do.
So there is an acknowledgement that there are some issues specifically around collective bargaining that have to be addressed, that this legislation isn't superseding collective bargaining agreements.
Representative Budinsky, we do have in our views some recommendations for rigorous technical assistance with the committee on those sections. The one thing that we want to do is learn from the past where we implemented without bargaining and understand what our obligations are so that we meet those obligations and that we use the authority to its fullest extent possible.
Okay. I yield back. Thank you.
Representative Baird.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here today. I want to follow up on a few of Ms. Buzinski's questions because we're genuinely looking at this electronic health record issue. But first, wanted to ask Ms. Murphy, and the chairman was kind of getting at this point earlier, but is it true that a veteran who has their Second Amendment rights revoked through that process, their only opportunity to appeal that is after they've already appeared on the list, basically prohibiting them from owning a firearm? Is that correct?
So VA, previous to the Consolidated Appropriations Act last year, was reporting to NICS. Now we have only reported to NICS when there is a court order finding that meets the requirements. As far as I've lost track of your question. Could you?
Yeah, so basically their only opportunity to appeal would be
I'm
after NICS has already been.
So we report as required in the cases. Once they are on the NICS list, there is an appeal process There's a
There's no
there's a re
There's no opportunity or no notification given to a veteran before they would appear on NICS, basically to discourage that from going forward.
So from our side, from the VA side, we would provide them information. We make 2 attempts at phone calls during our due process for the fiduciary program purpose to explain what the Brady Act is, what the ramifications would be, just so that they are aware. I believe that, so once they are on the NICS list, they could ask for a reconsideration.
Just of that particular provision. And it's different than what a civilian would encounter in a similar situation.
That's my understanding.
Okay. Thank you. And then, Ms. Therrett, can you give us a few examples in your experience of just misconduct that you've been made aware of that led to an investigation, that led to a termination, and others that led to an investigation that did not lead to a termination for an employee?
So, Representative, we have varying examples. We take
Right.
about 5,000 adverse actions a year to remove, to suspend, or to demote employees. So, and I know our Office of Accountability and Whistleblower Protection has testified on some of the investigations that they have done of senior leaders and the outcomes that have been implemented regarding termination of those senior leaders. So I am aware of situations that have led to an investigation which was recommended a termination, and that termination was taken. We've also had situations where employees have retired or resigned before that action could be taken.
Okay.
And I know I have recommended that we look at strengthening some of those procedures so individuals are not walking out the door with adverse actions and no action taken to hold them accountable.
If a person resigns prior to a finding, does that carry forward with them to another federal agency or another federal job that they may be applying for?
There are limitations in the current legislation. So for instance, it does not cover senior executives. It does not cover individuals who retire. And the circumstances under which a personnel record can be annotated. So if somebody goes to another federal agency, that adverse action or that misconduct is seen by the current employer does not always happen in every single case.
Okay.
So we again look forward to the committee to saying, what can we do to improve? What can we do to be the standard bearer when it comes
Right.
to employee performance and accountability in the federal government?
And then how long on average does it take for an investigation for a serious case of misconduct, an allegation of that? How long would an investigation typically take?
So average timeframes can vary depending on the allegations, depending on the number of witnesses who need to be contacted. I
you
know
give
the
me a
Office of
typical?
Accountability and Whistleblower Protection maybe said 120 days on average in some cases.
Okay,
So that could be
120
4
days.
months.
And I'm running short on time, but do you feel that there is a disincentive baked into that for managers within VA to go forward with that investigation? If they feel that it takes too long, that the results won't actually be actioned, that a person will walk away and maybe take another job before they would be held accountable for something?
Representative, I have heard of situations where managers feel that it's either not worth their time or they don't feel that they would be supported in going through the process and taking an action. And we need to make sure that our managers are supported if they're doing the right thing and holding somebody who's not performing at the level expected or engaging in misconduct accountable.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Ramirez, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. As the ranking member of Oversight and Investigations for this committee, I take seriously my responsibility to carefully weigh the impacts of legislation we advance out of this committee. It's my priority to ensure that the bills we advance protect the VA programs and services that meet veterans' needs and improve the quality of their lives. However, I gotta say, there are some that still insist that the mass firings that are happening are not impacting our veterans. So, Ms. Therrett, let me ask you, did you do an analysis of how these reckless terminations would impact the agency's efficiency?
Representative Ramirez, I mentioned in Ranking Member Takano's call that it's about 1,400 employees.
No, I'm asking, did you do an analysis before you went on to fire that many people?
I mentioned to Ranking Member Takano that I would be happy to take these questions on the terminations during probation and provide answers.
So you're not responding about doing analysis. So we don't know who in the VA did that analysis. We don't know who told you to prepare that memo. We don't know what went into any analysis, if in fact there was an analysis, because we're saying that there's not going to be an impact on veterans, but we are seeing mass firings happen. We don't know if you trusted that analysis because you're unable to disclose that. So let's say it for what it is. As far as right now, we as members of this committee and as the ranking member of Oversight and Investigations, I have no idea if you did your homework before firing thousands of veterans and VA employees to make sure veteran care and benefits would not be impacted. Let me just make sure I say that. Ms. Barrett, less than 3 weeks ago, you testified before our subcommittee that under current law, the VA cannot discipline an employee if there is no evidence to support a punishment. In other words, the VA can only discipline an employee only if there is evidence of wrongdoing. Yet today, the VA supports the Restore VA Accountability Act, which limits the evidence the VA can consider when disciplining employees. By limiting the Douglas factors, which is an important criteria that agencies have to consider before any disciplinary action to ensure fairness in the process, aren't we suggesting that the VA should consider some pieces of evidence but not others? Isn't that in effect just suppressing evidence? I mean, we're clear that there could be evidence that negates or mitigates a disciplinary action, correct? But the VA wouldn't be able to consider that evidence? I don't understand how that's fair. So, let me ask, my question to you is, do you believe that limiting the Douglas factor is constitutional?
Representative Maria, I want to make sure that the Restore Accountability Act
Well,
offers
hold on.
employees due process.
Okay, so let me ask the question again, because I think it's really important. I mean, our responsibility is to uphold the Constitution here. So let me ask you again, do you believe limiting the Douglas factors is in fact constitutional, yes or no?
I believe employees should have due process when they are held to a standard of performance and
So
conduct.
you don't believe the Douglas factors is constitutional, or you do believe that they're constitutional, yes or no?
I believe there have to be factors, whether they were the Douglas factors or other factors that are used in making those due process determinations.
Ms. Barrett, I'm sitting here and I'm watching people who have dedicated their life to protecting and to providing access to benefits and service to our veterans in tears. I am asking myself, how the heck am I in a room right now where the person that is responsible for emails can't tell me who told her to write the email, can walk us through the process in which they determine if it's going to impact the ability for veterans to receive the benefits that they deserve. And here I am with no answers. I mean, you have to understand the frustration in the ranking member here, because we're talking about accountability, but somehow there's no accountability in what you just did. And that's why I have to tell you that it is incredibly important that on the record, I state to you that what is happening in the VA is unacceptable and has real consequences to our veterans. If there was no real analysis done, if you are firing left and right during probation period, and if you have no way of determining why the employee was fired, then that tells me that there's no real due process. And I can't leave here without putting that on the record. So, Ms. Murphy, I want to go to you as I wrap up, and I just want to ask you a real quick question. Do you believe that without sufficient mechanisms in place, that we are able to protect veterans?
Could you be more specific with the
That-
context for that, please?
Yeah, and I'm thinking, well, I know that we're running out. So let me get back if I can the next round.
Certainly.
Thank you.
First off, I want to remind members that their questions should be directed to the topic of the hearing, which is the 3 pieces of legislation that we have before us. 5 pieces of legislation that we have before us. It's been a long day. So,
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'll just remind you that we are considering the VA Accountability Act, which does
That's
change the
true.
authority,
That's true. And
our
some of the
questions-
comments have went beyond what that language actually does, and the questions went beyond what the Accountability Act actually does.
Well, everything that I've heard today is very germane to accountability? What are the standards we're using to hire and fire people? Or
But
how
not-
they can
but
be
not the actual language of
or
the bill.
disciplined? We're disciplined. Our questions are going to, people are being fired and under disciplinary, they were said that they're.
Not under the bill that we're discussing.
Well, the bill
The
we're
bill
discussing.
the bill that we're discussing does not deal with the situation that, and I gave you free rein to go ahead and have the communication and talk about it, and I responded, but we have to be focused on these bills that are before us today. That doesn't mean we won't have another time where we will talk and discuss that, but as we go away from what the actual language of the bill is, then it deters from the actual language of the bills that we're trying to deal with.
So, Mr. Chairman, when will we have a hearing on this topic of all these dismissed veterans? When will you commit to do a hearing?
We can discuss that at another time. But right now, we
So
have.
do you commit
we
to
have-
doing a hearing on all these dismissals that contradict?
We've actually had conversations in this room. We've had conversations in the other room in the full hearing on these issues. Now, my thought is that we need to get focused on the bills that are before us. You and I have had this. We've actually discussed it in in bicameral hearing, and we've let that go. We need to actually get back to focusing on the bills that are before us so that we can have this hearing that we need to have.
That's fine. You have these.
But
we have veterans who have been dismissed. Who's had glowing performance records, and we ought to know why.
And you know
I'm
what?
asking you, will you commit to doing a hearing on that
I have
topic?
answered that if they come to me, we can talk about that.
Excuse me?
If they come to me, we can talk about that. I said that to the hearing in there. I said that. If the individual, there is a due process that they can go through.
I would ask you, I think this merits a hearing. The American people are upset about these veterans who have been dismissed with glowing performance records. And there seems to have no performance, there's been no analysis on efficiency, on how this affects, there's no justification for why.
Okay. Representative Hanmaday, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I sit here time and time again, I see my colleagues on the other side always seeming to protect the bureaucracy. And I want to remind everybody that the VA employs over 400,000 employees. And what we're talking about is 1,400. I mean, the 400,000 employees, that's bigger than the United States Navy. I know you all have a tough task ahead of you to make sure that the VA is actually working for the veteran. Going back to the topic at hand, as a veteran and a former prosecutor myself, I understand that oath of office to uphold the Constitution and to protect the communities. But I'm proud to co-lead Chairman Boss' Veterans Second Amendment Protection Act because it's crucial that veterans retain the same constitutional rights we fought to protect. Now, Ms. Murphy, does the VA ever report veterans to NICS before considering any evidence that they may be a danger to themselves or others?
Thank you for that question. Under the current construct, we are not reporting anyone other than those who have been adjudicated under a court order that included that they were a danger to themselves or others. So that is under our current instruction. That is already taken care of by the court.
And when did that happen?
In March of 2024 under the Consolidated Appropriations Act. So that's the authority we're operating under now.
Are you following the Supreme Court's guidelines?
We are following the guidelines of the act.
Now, Ms. Murphy, would the Access Act, by codifying clear access standards and expanding eligibility for substance use and urgent mental health care, help these veterans get the care they deserve?
I'd like to ask Dr. Yande to weigh in on that, please.
Yes, Congressman. We are supportive of the Access Act, and we believe it will improve access to veterans, both on the community care side as well as on the direct care side, in making sure veterans get timely access to substance abuse care and residential treatment programs.
I'm often hear this report or this poll that's by my Democrats colleagues and some at the VA that say that the VA has a 92% trust in the health care that they receive when veterans go there. But that study often is only talking about people who actually went through the VA process or the outpatient. It's a post-outpatient survey. But it doesn't talk about those who never made it through the system. And that's kind of my biggest concern right now when you're talking about mental health and substance use, and they never make it through the system because they find the bureaucracy and the red tape so difficult to go through. And I think that's why the Access Act is going to hopefully resolve some of this. And is that what your opinion is as well?
I would say, Congressman, the Access Act, particularly the RRTP provisions, very clearly delineate the thresholds when we should be referring veterans out. And they would be reducing both the priority threshold from 72 to 48 hours and the non-priority thresholds from 30 to 20 days. And we believe that will improve access to veterans.
And even implementing that already?
We have made a policy decision, and I can't tell you exactly when, to implement the 72-hour threshold and the 30-day threshold. If this act is implemented, we will make some changes to meet that threshold. But we have also already put in some place some processes that allow us to sort of meet the current thresholds, and we'll have to just tweak those if this particular act is passed.
And you're able to currently do that even given the 1,400 people who were dismissed?
I'm not sure I can answer your question in terms of the impacts of those 1,400 individuals. I would just say we are committed to making sure veterans get their timely access. The only thing I would add is that there is an exceptions list that has been submitted, and most of the frontline staff are part of that exception list.
All right, thank you. Chairman, I yield back.
Representative Brownlee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to ask my first question to Dr. Yendi. Dr. Yendi, last week, DOJ canceled a contract with a service-disabled, veteran-owned small business that supported VHA in marketing and recruiting for difficult-to-fill clinical staff positions, staff vacancies at VA medical centers and clinics nationwide. It's my understanding that this contract, some version of which has existed for 20 years, actually saves VA money by decreasing the cost per hire. Without this contract, VA will struggle to attract the doctors and nurses that they need, leading to an additional workforce shortages, care delays, and more care being sent to the community and rising costs. Are you aware of this contract being canceled?
I am not aware about the cancellation of the contract, so I'll have to take that back as the potential impacts.
Are you aware of the contract and what it does?
I am vaguely aware about contracts to help hire sort of providers in the VA, but I don't have the details.
Okay, so you're vaguely aware of the contract, vaguely aware of what its intention to do is to help bring in applicants for important positions within the VA. Do you agree that that's its purpose?
I believe so.
Okay. So if we don't have it, if we don't have that contract, do you believe that that could impact our ability to hire high-quality professionals in the organization?
Congresswoman, having served at a facility as a chief of staff, I would say there are multiple ways to bring on providers, both VA providers, fee-basis providers. So in terms of the impacts of terminating that contract on being able to bring in frontline providers, I don't have that information, but we can definitely get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you. So, Ms. Thurrott, I think I wanted to ask you to, so I think we've established that 2,400 people have been laid off or fired from the VA. Are you aware that the VA has continually told us that there are 40,000 vacancies within the VA that need to be filled? Does that number sound accurate to you?
50,000 employees, and we manage to our budget. Our budget does not have 40,000 vacancies on our records. So we're looking at a smaller percentage than 40,000 vacancies of positions that we continue to fill. As Dr. Yende had mentioned, under the hiring freeze that the Office of Personnel Management communicated in January, we have identified over 100 occupational series that we continue to fill. And we make sure that those positions that are in the Veterans Health Administration, the Veterans Benefits Administration, National Cemetery Administration, the board are filled.
Got it. Thank you. So of the 24 that have been fired, do you have any idea, so veterans make up about almost 29% of the VA's workforce, and many of those are 100% service-connected disabled veterans who were in those jobs. Do you have any idea how many of our veterans were impacted by this firing and layoff?
Representative Brownlee, about a third of our workforce are veterans. And with respect to veteran hiring and veteran recruitment and veteran retention, probationary status looks at prior federal service. And in many of those instances, under the Veterans Recruitment Authority, they continue to have continuous service. So don't have the specific numbers of the 1,400 that have been impacted, but can provide that information.
Okay, well, I would certainly like to. I would certainly like to know that. I'd also like to know how many were working in VA medical facilities across the country as well. So I don't have much time left, but I understand that there are several people here in the audience who have been impacted by this firing and layoff, and I just want to thank them actually for being here. And I don't know what all of their responsibilities are exactly, but I know that I know some of them are doing very important work that have been laid off. Some are training actually people who are coming out of the military to work for the VA to teach them how to be procurement managers. Some are making sure that their benefits are right and completely fulfilled as they should be. So to me, these are very, very important positions that need to be filled, and I'm sorry to the people who are here that don't have a voice in this hearing, and I will yield back.
Representative Kendi.
Thank you. First, let me start by thanking all the veterans that are here with us today for your service to our country, and those federal workers that are here with us today that are veterans of this country, and those that are service disabled. I thank you for your service, and I'm disgusted by the way that you've been treated. Not just you in this room, but your colleagues, military colleagues across this country. It is heartbreaking, it's infuriating, and it's wrong. And we're talking about those that have dedicated their lives to service to this country, and then some of whom have bled for this country, and then have dedicated their lives even further by going into public service as federal workers. And yet, because you're on probation, or so that's what we've been told, we can't even get a straight answer today, your job is terminated. That's despicable. Our veterans deserve better, especially those veterans that have bled for this country. And this House has an obligation to treat you with dignity and respect like the heroes that you are. I spoke to a service-disabled veteran this past week who worked as a federal worker for over a decade and a half and took a promotion less than a year ago. His job was terminated. He was on the chop block. These were arbitrary cuts. Arbitrary cuts. Despicable. Ms. Theret, you talk about the fact that there is less of a staff shortage across the VA. According to the VA's own numbers, it's 40,000. That's the number we were told by the VA. That is not accurate?
Representative Kennedy, the 40,000 number are not funded positions. There are a smaller number of funded vacancies.
But there is a shortage.
There are staffing models that identify requirements, and those requirements can support that number that you mentioned. So there's a requirements and a staffing model and a staffing study that is done around what workforce is needed to support some of the care. And I believe those were some of the numbers that were identified through the PACT Act.
But yet, right when the executive order by President Trump was put into place, the hiring freeze, there were 1,900 plus people in the pipeline that were hired to ready to go to work at our VA across this country, and they were automatically cut. Is that accurate?
So Representative Kennedy, there were many employees, about 1,700, who had job offers and they were brought on board.
And those job offers were rescinded, correct?
No, they were actually brought on board by February the 8th based on those offers that had been made and those start dates that
So
were established.
1,700 people whose jobs had been offered were hired after the hiring freeze.
Correct.
I'd like to see a detailed account of that. There were 716 job postings that were taken offline. Is that accurate?
My understanding is it was 714
Okay,
opportunity
714
announcements.
that were taken down, correct?
Correct.
So we have a staff shortage, according to the VA's own account. We have those that were posted that were not hired, and we have 1,400, you're telling us 1,400. We still haven't seen a detailed account of these firings.
So Representative Kennedy, we have exemptions approved by the Office of Personnel Management to continue hiring, to continue posting job opportunity announcement. We continue to bring employees on each pay period to support our veterans in our medical centers as well as our benefits offices and our cemeteries.
Well, tell that to the 1,400 people that were terminated, those veterans and service-disabled veterans who were terminated. Tell them that there was an exemption. There was no true exemption for our VA and those veterans, including those that are sitting right behind you here today. It's unconscionable. And this country is better than that. We have a history of treating our military veterans with a priority, and that did not happen in this instance. I yield back.
Representative Dexter, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Bost and Ranking Member Takano for convening this hearing, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. To our veterans who were so clearly fired without any understanding of the impact, not only on you, but on our veterans throughout this country, I'm sorry, and thank you for being here. Please know that the Democrats are going to be fighting for you. And that includes standing up against HR 472, which makes it easier to fire our committed VA employees, injecting more cruel chaos into our communities. Just last week, back home in Oregon, I convened a roundtable with almost 15 veteran-serving organizations. Our state has one of the highest veteran suicide rates in the country. Each one of the advocates and veterans at that table underscored the importance of preventing these tragic deaths. Ms. Therrett, is it correct that suicide prevention is the VA's #1 clinical priority?
Yende to answer the question.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Yende.
Yes, Dr. Dexter, we agree.
Thank you. And I believe Ms. Therrett has confirmed this number, but I just want to ask again, how many veterans have been fired since January 20th? Veterans.
Dr. Dexter, I will have to take that question for the record.
Okay. Job and income loss are two of the top indicators for suicidal ideation. Is that correct, Dr. Yende?
It could be one of the many factors. Yes.
I believe it's documented that that is accurate, but thank you. Now tell me, Ms. Therrett, what communication did the VA provide to veterans prior to termination to help them cope with their job and income loss?
Dr. Dexter, I will take that question for the record.
I just want to underline that we have prioritized clinically suicide prevention as our top clinical priority, and we went on to terminate veterans without any impactful intervention prior to that termination. Is that accurate?
Dr. Dexter, I will take that question for the record.
Okay. So we have established that you sent an email to fire them, and I will assert, unless we're proven otherwise when you get back to us, that that was done without any additional support for these veterans.
Dr. Dexter, as I had mentioned, I'm prepared to talk about the Restore Accountability Act today.
I think this is directly relevant, so I'm going to now move to what did you send these veterans after they were terminated to help them cope with their job and income loss to hopefully prevent suicide in these veterans and our workers?
Dr. Dexter, I can mention that as the Chief Human Capital Officer at the VA, in my signature block, I have the 911 Suicide Prevention Hotline. That information is always available to individuals who contact me, and I think as Chairman Bost had mentioned, if anybody has concerns about the action that the VA has taken, they are free to reach out to us or to others for answers to those questions.
So that is 911 is always available. I also understand that our crisis line had terminations impacting that as well. I'll just make the statement because I assume that that's not going to be elaborated on. Laying off veterans, especially without proper mental health resources, is a betrayal of their service to our country and our promise to them. I urge you all to remember that no amount of perceived efficiency is worth abandoning our values as Americans and our commitment to these brave veterans who served our country. And to add insult to injury, among those fired, Ms. Therrett, was an instructor, as I mentioned, for the Veteran Suicide Prevention Hotline. It's a cruel irony that the Trump administration, enabled by Republicans, is not only putting our veteran employees at risk, but in doing so is making it harder for veterans to access care, which we have said is our top clinical priority in their greatest hours of need. Our veterans deserve much better than what this administration and our country is standing up for at this moment, and I believe that we have a duty to address this issue imminently. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
Dr. Conaway, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our veterans are courageous men and women who have sacrificed much of their lives to defend and protect our country. These brave men and women make up roughly 30% of our federal workforce. Our House Appropriations Committee estimates that nearly 6,000 veterans have lost their jobs, which is, to my mind, completely unacceptable when we understand and know, and we've heard, well, partial answers to our questions about staffing levels at the VA. Many veteran employees who have been terminated were probationary employees, as you mentioned, as some of you have mentioned, but many of these persons were not people who were new to the VA system. They were people who had been in the VA system for some time and were promoted into new positions. And so it makes their termination, presumably they were promoted because they were doing a good job to be promoted. And so it makes their determination as probationary periods, using that as a subtext, particularly galling. Can you discuss, and I'll start with Ms. Murphy, what impact you think these firings will have on the lives of veterans and our families, and in particular the veterans, the many veterans who were terminated from service in these rounds of cuts?
So Dr. Conaway, from the veterans benefits perspective on our side of VA, the core mission, delivering benefits to veterans, has continued. I would point out that just today we issued a press release noting that we've reached our 1 millionth claims processed earlier this year than ever. And in the we've had 10 of our highest production days just in the last month, and the highest day ever at 12,000 claims. So we're continuing to deliver, as Secretary Collins has instructed, on our core mission, delivering benefits to veterans.
Well, that you're working on your core mission is one thing, but the question is what are the outcomes as you're working on that? Ms. Therrett, you mentioned that the number 40,000 is not an accurate number reflecting the vacancies, but you suggested in your comments that if you look at budgeted, at what's budgeted for staff, that there is a gap between, with respect to the number of employees for which there is a budget who have not, whose positions have not actually been filled. Can you tell us what that number is? If it's 40,000 is wrong, and you mentioned we've got a budget limiting that, what is the number of budgeted positions that are not filled?
Dr. Conaway, the information that we publish on a quarterly basis related to the Mission Act Section 505 report contains that information. I'm happy to provide it. I don't have it with me today.
Okay. Thank you, and I look forward to getting that information. Now, Dr. Allende, excuse me. Do you, and we've had a question about this, and perhaps we can get a more fulsome answer, but the VA facilities across the nation, are they fully staffed, or, I mean, and if they're not fully staffed, and we don't believe they are, is it 70% fully staffed, 80%? Where do you think that number? Can you give us a range at least about the staffing levels at these facilities across the nation?
I would have to take that question back and provide a more definite number. I don't have that information.
And what do you, just in your experience at running agencies and healthcare systems, doesn't staffing play an important role in the outcomes of care that people receive in those institutions that have, that are delivering, well, any service, but in this case, healthcare to veterans, or other services to veterans for that matter?
Yes, Dr. Conway, staffing does play a role, but leadership at VA facilities, day in and day out, try to make sure that veterans' frontline access is not impacted by staffing, and there are multiple ways to do that.
And yet we've seen time after time reported, and this is not any particular administration, by the way, but we've seen that veterans are having trouble accessing care. Referrals can sit for 6-9 months, we've heard in this very hearing room, for people with possible cancer who don't get on to definitive care. So what do you expect that you're going to be able to do to meet the staffing shortfall that's currently in place? And by the way, you mentioned, well, I'm about done, but please tell us about what you expect to happen with respect to staffing and how that's going to positively impact the responsibilities of the VA.
Gentleman, time is expired. Thank you. Dr. Miller-Meeks, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for holding this important hearing. Ms. Murphy, after a veteran, and I'm saying this as both a veteran, married to a veteran, in a family of veterans, and also a doctor, former nurse. So after a veteran is already reported to NICS based on no evidence of dangerousness, isn't it harmful to a veteran's mental health that they have to prove to the VA that they're not dangerous to get their name removed from NICS?
Pardon me.
Is there any effect on a veteran's dignity, purposefulness, and mental health and well-being if they have to prove to the VA that they're not defective after they've been reported to the NICS system by someone who may not be a doctor, may not have any medical experience, and may not be a judge?
So I do want to point out that this year, since March of 2024, when our reporting requirements changed, we have reported 3 individuals. So the number in the past, I believe the prior fiscal year was around 13,000, similar to the prior fiscal year before that. So our reporting numbers are much lower. And so to have the requirement to be, it's currently not an issue. Previously, when we were reporting higher, there was an appeal process, there was a request for relief process, and those were taken on a case-by-case basis. Even in the Veterans Fiduciary Program, there's opportunity if there's a change in the mental health condition, they can submit additional evidence.
Well,
and
thank you for saying
request-
that. So if the VA updates the Attorney General that all prior reports of veterans to NICS solely because they have a fiduciary no longer applies, will the veteran who is reported the NICS list for other reasons stay on the NICS list? Or are they removed from the NICS list? Are they still on the list even if they find there was no basis? Or they know the fiduciary no longer applies to them?
So they would still be on the NICS list, and we would have to.
So without due process, they are still on the NICS list. They're denied their constitutional rights, even after they've been, the attorney generals have been told that it no longer applies to them. So they're referred solely on the basis of having a fiduciary. I found that appalling after these veterans are the ones that defended our rights. Dr. Yindi, one of the things that we've heard throughout the community and from veterans is that their experience getting appointments with community care. So if they meet the eligibility, i.e. they can't get to a VA clinic appointment within 30 days and or they live over 40 miles, that getting the appointment varies dramatically depending upon which VA facility or region they're in. What steps is the VA taking to ensure that community care policies such as the referral coordination initiative are implemented consistently across all visits?
We have very clear guidance to each facility to make sure that referral coordination initiative, or RCI, is implemented in as many specialties as possible. And I would just add, Chairman, there are other reasons why there may be delays, which may be related to staff who help to schedule these appointments. We work closely with the sites where there are long wait times in making sure they have the right processes, the right leadership, and the right staffing level. It's not just typically staffing level. There may be multiple factors at play.
And Dr. Yundi, if a veteran wants a mental health appointment in person, shouldn't that be up to them and their decision?
Yes.
Rather than the VA considering that we've given them a telehealth appointment within 30 days, and so therefore they've denied a visit or an appointment if they want their visit in person?
We agree with you, Chair.
Okay, thank you so much. With that, Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Thank you. The gentlewoman yields back. Ms. Murphy and all others, thank you so much for being here. You're dismissed and excused, and we want to then invite the second panel up to the witness table. Turn my mic on first. I'd like to welcome our second panel, Mr. Jim Wally, the Chief Executive Officer of Mission Roll Call, Mr. Patrick Murphy, the Director of National Legislative Services of Veterans of Foreign War, and I would also like to extend a special welcome to a former member of Congress, himself a veteran, Mr. Max Rose, has served here in this Congress, and like I said, is a veteran himself. Nice tie, by the way. Welcome. No one understands that, but you and I do. He is with us today as a senior advisor to the Veterans Voice Foundation. I appreciate it, all of you being here. So if you could, would you please stand and raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you, and let the record reflect that the witnesses have answered in the affirmative. Mr. Wally, you are now recognized for 5 minutes for your opening statement.
Ranking Member Takano and distinguished members of the House Veterans Affairs Committee, thank you for this opportunity to testify on behalf of Mission Roll Call and the 1.4 million veterans we represent. At Mission Roll Call, our goal is simple: making sure veterans' voices are heard where it matters most. We use polling and direct engagement to bring real, unfiltered veteran perspectives to policymakers and the public. Amplifying this data on behalf of veterans and their families allows us to advocate for meaningful change that improves the lives of those who have served. One of the biggest concerns we hear about is access to health care. While the Mission Act of 2018 made improvements, many veterans still struggle. A recent poll of over 2,500 veterans and family members found 44% experienced delays in care, 31% had difficulty scheduling, and 12% were denied community care. Veterans shouldn't have to wait unreasonable amounts of time or travel excessive distance to receive care. That's why we support the Veterans Access Act of 2025, to ensure care is built around the veteran, not bureaucracy. This act makes important progress on several fronts. Namely, it mandates reasonable time and distance standards to ensure veterans aren't asked to travel too far or too long to receive care. It clarifies wait time standards to help prevent lengthy delays in receiving care. It gives veterans a voice in how, when, and where they receive care. And perhaps most importantly, it ensures no veteran in need of crucial mental health care is left unattended in their moments of greatest need. Another issue is the Veterans Second Amendment Protection Act. Right now, the VA reports to the FBI's NICS database over 270,000 veterans since 1998. By comparison, the FBI itself has reported fewer than 2,000 under the same criteria. The decision to list any American on the NICS list and encroach upon constitutionally protected rights should not be made lightly and should only be done through judicial process. Yet the VA has made this an administrative decision. Veterans fear seeking help for PTS or TBI could cost them their rights without due process. Congress temporarily addressed this issue last year, but it's time to make it a permanent protection. Of course, none of this matters if we don't hold the VA accountable. The VA serves over 9 million veterans, but too many still face barriers to timely care. Long wait times persist, and veterans regularly report difficulty assessing services. The Restore VA Accountability Act of 2025 is a step toward ensuring the VA effectively addresses underperformance and maintains a veterans first culture. Serving veterans is a privilege, and every VA employee should be held to the highest standards. Lastly, I want to highlight the importance of the Student Veteran Benefit Restoration Act. Education benefits are life-changing for veterans. Veterans invest in their futures using their hard-earned educational benefits, but when a school loses state approval or commits fraud, they are left with nothing. This bill ensures veterans do not lose their benefits due to circumstances out of their control. At Mission Roll Call, we believe in solutions, not just critiques. We're eager to partner with the VA to tackle these challenges together. We also recognize the vital role of veteran service organizations nationwide and urge collaboration to maximize impact. Working together, we can ensure veterans and their families receive the care and support they deserve. The bottom line, we need policies that put veterans first: health care, protection of rights, accountability at the VA, and education benefits. These issues directly impact veterans and their families. Mission Roll Call will continue to amplify and bring their voices to you, because where policy and serving veterans is concerned, veterans' voices should lead the conversation. Chairman Bost, Ranking Member Takano, other distinguished members of the committee, this concludes my testimony. Thank you. I look forward to any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bost. Appreciate that. Mr. Murphy, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Bost, Ranking Member Takano, members of the committee, on behalf of the men and women of the VFW and its auxiliary, thank you for the opportunity to provide remarks on this legislation today. On accountability, the VFW fully agrees that the VA Secretary should have the ability to remove bad employees from their roles. We believe Secretary McDonough should have had this authority, as the same applies to Secretary Collins, but we're worried that this could now lead to more arbitrary firings of competent and capable employees simply as a cost-cutting measure. 2 weeks ago, Secretary Collins announced VA fired more than 1,000 employees. Last night, it was 1,400 more. Nowhere in these messages did it explain what warranted that action. Members on this committee regularly say VA needs to weed out the bad actors, and we agree. But the dismissal of thousands of employees was not done because it was warranted, it was done because it was easy. Among the employees who were let go were veterans and military spouses. Other firings were of employees recently promoted into new roles. Some of these firings have been rescinded because they were key positions, but that's not the case for all. Before this committee advances this bill, we ask that there be proper oversight to ensure the men and women who serve our veterans, caregivers, and survivors were not fired from crucial roles. The VFW supports the Student Veteran Benefit Restoration Act to protect student veterans and their earned education benefits from schools that commit fraud. This legislation would require VA to restore the education entitlements to the student, and the school would be required to repay VA the associated funds it received. As written, and if passed into law, these protections would apply to future violations or fraud, and we recommend including retroactive restoration of education entitlements for students who could be affected prior to enactment. The VFW supports H.R. 1041 to protect veterans' Second Amendment rights and establish due process for those who have been assigned fiduciaries by VA before referring them to the next list. We supported this bill over 15 years ago when an earlier version was first brought to VFW's attention, and will continue to support this proposal until it's passed into law. Even though the issue of fiduciaries affects a small percentage of veterans, we argue that every veteran deserves protection of their constitutional rights. The VFW also supports H.R. 740, the Veterans Access Act. This proposal would provide some enhancements to VA community care program. Since the passage of the Mission Act in 2018, VA has not implemented this program consistently across its entire network. Veterans deserve consistency in their care, and this is a step towards providing that. While this proposal does not address VA direct care, we'd be remiss not to remind this committee that some of the reasons community care appointments and costs are increasing is because VA cannot provide some of these vital services. Care in the community is VA care, but providing resources for care only in the community is something that we cannot abide by. VA care, direct care can lead to, VA direct care can lead to a less capable VA and an over-reliance on the pressure relief system of community care. This could be detrimental to the overall care for veterans. Lastly, Section 302 of this proposal seeks to implement a different pilot program for accessing certain mental health services without a prior referral authorization if the veteran is enrolled in VA healthcare. This process is similar to the existing urgent care treatment models available to veterans. That system works for veterans because it allows quick access to treatment that could typically face certain delays or overcrowding VA emergency rooms. But that system also brings high costs and unknown budget impacts. VA does not know if 10 veterans will use that system or if 10,000 veterans will use that system. VA simply has to pay the bill when it shows up. This uncoordinated care has grown the community care budget in the past 2 years, and we predict this provision could have similar unpredictable increases in cost. We believe this provision could be beneficial, but we'd like to warn against reductions in direct VA care in order to maintain these uncoordinated care options. Chairman Bost, Ranking Member Takano, thank you for the opportunity to provide remarks on these bills today, and I'm prepared to answer any questions you may have.
Mr. Murray, thank you. Congressman Rose, you're recognized.
Chairman, thank you. It's great to see you again, Ranking Member. It's great to see you as well. It's really an honor to come back to this committee, which I was so honored to serve on, and of course, I'm equally honored that my return to this committee has caused such a surge in member attendance to hear what I have to say. So, I am the senior advisor to VetVos Foundation, representing nearly 2 million veterans and military families across the country. I'm also a veteran myself, a Purple Heart recipient, and I continue to serve in the reserves. And roughly 3-4 years ago, I myself hit a rough patch and made the decision along with my family that I would seek mental health care at my local VA. It's not something I'm ashamed of, and I think every veteran at one point or another goes through that moment. What I found at my local VA was an institution that wasn't just represented by the actual healthcare providers. I found a home, a place that understands veterans. That's why we built this institution as a nation. That's why we continue to support it, because we've collectively made the decision that we need a healthcare organization that is uniquely suited for veterans. And I believe that this committee stands in a bipartisan fashion to fight for and defend that. Which brings me to this issue of community care. We all collectively agree that if there needs to be a safeguard for if veterans cannot seek care or find the care that they need at a local VA. But I also equally believe that we have to fight for each and every day to make sure that our VA is properly resourced. And at times, those two issues can be awfully conflicting. We have got to make sure that both from a budgeting standpoint as well as from a policy standpoint, what we are spending our days on is looking at how we can improve the VA itself, not slowly kill it via a thinly veiled effort at privatization. That's what I believe our North Star should be. I'm also gravely concerned by the lack of transparency and uncertainty surrounding the recent policy changes that have directly impacted the VA workforce. I do not believe that there's any such thing as a non-essential category of VA workers. They are all essential, and they all directly impact patient care. We know for a fact that there have been blanket firings, at least large groups of people that work the front desk at VAs, medical technicians, people that service hotlines, people that support, at least on an ancillary basis, surgeries and other absolutely essential services. Now, they may not be direct providers, but they are absolutely essential, and they absolutely impact direct patient care. And I believe that the consequences of these mass firings will result in veterans not receiving the care that they need, and ultimately veterans being put in harm's way. And that directly contradicts the promise that we as a nation have made to veterans, that they, when they sign on that dotted line and make a promise to make the ultimate sacrifice for this nation, that we will be there for them when they come home. My views on the legislation before the committee today is in my written testimony. I, of course, look forward to speaking about that. And I'll conclude with this: as you deliberate on these bills, my guiding principle remains steadfast. Our veterans deserve policies that honor their service, protect their rights, and provide them with the support they need to thrive. I look forward to working with this committee to ensure your legislative efforts achieve our common goals while upholding the trust and well-being of our veterans. I thank you for your time and look forward to your questions.
For 5 minutes. This one is for the entire panel. Yes or no? Do you believe every American citizen, including every veteran, is entitled to their day in court before they lose any constitutional right? Yes.
Yes.
Certainly, of course.
Mr. Murray, a few weeks ago, a VFW representative testified that VA denied her request for a specialized mental health program due to the program being out of network. Do you believe veterans should be able to access community care that works for them regardless of their network?
Absolutely. That instance was actually denied multiple times because a veteran on the East Coast wanted a treatment facility first in Arizona, then in Utah. But because that was in Tri-West versus Optum, it was denied. Right. There was nothing that we found that was in writing, that was in statute and regulation. It was just in practice. We believe it might have been the contracts, but we're not privy to some of that information. That could have led to disastrous consequences.
Mr. Wally, how do you how do underperforming employees impact the quality of care provided to veterans?
Well, I think every American expects our VA to be the most efficient and effective program it can possibly be. I mean, we can't expect to have the greatest military in the world if we don't have the greatest healthcare system in the world, both for active duty military and for veterans. So I think we want the best and brightest. We want to retain them. We want to give the opportunity to improve the capabilities of the VA.
Mr. Wally, also for veterans with substance use disorder, does it take a lot of courage to show up to a facility and admit they need help? And do you think the VA current community care process is simple enough for veterans to get the care that they need?
No, the numbers speak for themselves. The number for suicides has not dropped in years. In fact, it's gone higher. So we know that there's a challenge, a significant challenge, that our country should be embarrassed about. We have too many veterans that are taking their life. We need to make it easy for them to get the care they want when they need it, and promptly. We can't have veterans that have mental challenges, thoughts of suicide, have to wait for somebody to give them a call to get the appointment that they need. They need the appointment now. They need to be taken care of.
Yeah. Congressman Rose, you said yourself you used the VA facility, okay? How close was that VA facility to your home?
Well, Staten Island, so the traffic's always unpredictable, Chairman.
I understand.
But I'd say about a half hour.
Okay. So, and I agree with you, we don't want to privatize the VA. I'm going to tell you that right now. Never have I said I want to privatize the VA. But you do believe that if a person lives in Wyoming and is 3 or 4 hours at best from VA, they should still be able to receive care at the level that you do, being 15, 20 minutes, or even a half hour or 45 minutes based on traffic.
Sure, absolutely, Chairman. I believe that's already in statute based off of the ability for someone to seek community care dependent on how far away the nearest VA facility is. What the concern actually is with this legislation, if you look at, for instance, the pilot that is being offered, much of that is thrown out the window. And you see the opportunity for people to seek community-based care, often even without a referral. This opens the door exactly to privatization, what we both collectively have said what we're opposed to, because in instances like that, you are actually drawing funds away from the VA's capacity to serve its own institution. And that prevents veterans like myself from being able to still continue to go to institutions that were developed to actually understand them.
And that'll lead me to my last question. Do you believe the VA was created for the veterans, or was it created for the VA?
Of course the VA was created for veterans, of course.
Okay. The only concern that I have is that when we tell the veteran they have to go to the VA, and that veteran has, for whatever reason, a need to go into the community care, like I said, I think there's some very special things that our VA does and continue to do. Of course, this also leads to a bill that I believe you were around when we passed, which was Mission Act, right? Well, you were here for that, which part of that was also to revamp the VA so that because what we've got is we've got several veterans that might in 1950s lived in one area, and now we have very few veterans there, and that is in the Air Commission. And this is not an argument for the House because the House did their job. It's for the Senate to do their job. So we have no senators here, so we can't badmouth them over that. But with that, I yield back and ask for I recognize the ranking member for his question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, we're not going to talk about the Air Commission. All right. Congressman Rose, good to see you back, my friend.
Good to see you, too.
You're looking well. Thank you for being here today. And as a veteran and user of VA, your perspective is important for us, your insights. As Congress develops policies that may change how VA delivers care, what do you think are the most important considerations we should weigh to ensure veterans receive timely and high-quality health care?
Sure, I think the beginning, our North Star should be is that the VA, by virtually every metric is performing better than other large healthcare institutions based off of patient surveys, treatment quality, even in many instances, wait times, the VA is performing better. So I think our first immediate priority should be to make sure that we are investing at greater numbers into the VA. We also should note that the vast majority of VA employees could get paid more in other healthcare organizations. They are making the explicit choice to continue their record of service, many of whom are veterans. Their service should be honored, and they should be supported rather than fired en masse.
Thank you for that, Congressman Rose. How does staffing affect VA's ability to deliver timely and high-quality care to veterans?
I believe it's everything. And it's not just staffing in regards to how many nurses you have, how many direct primary care physicians, although that's absolutely essential. If you want to make sure that you are delivering high-quality care to veterans, you have to make sure that your front desks are manned. You have to make sure that there are proper care coordinators in place. You have to make sure that there are people policing the parking lots. All of those different types of positions were very largely represented in the groups that were just fired over the course of these past 2 weeks.
I'm glad you're getting to this. VA relies on staffing in its community care offices at VA medical centers to coordinate veterans' care when it is referred out. So when you get a referral to go in the community, you have this Office of Community Care, which actually follows through on that. It's staff. Is it my understanding that many of these community care offices are understaffed?
They're absolutely understaffed, and I'm so happy you brought this up, because when we think about community care, certainly if a veteran cannot get a specialty appointment within a month or even 20 days, community-based care is absolutely a priority and important. But that veteran then comes back to the VA, and everyone in healthcare today is focused on treating the entire person and making sure that there's properly integrated care. That is completely destroyed if we do not have an office in the VA that monitors that.
So this Office of Community Care, are you aware of firings that affected those offices?
Sure. I mean, I think we all collectively are.
Okay. Does the Veterans Access Act do anything to ensure that there's adequate staffing at VA community care offices to process those referrals?
Absolutely not, nor does the bill do anything to mandate or require that community-based healthcare options can actually serve the veteran better at a lower cost. In fact, the vast majority of the time, it's at a much higher cost, which is a detriment to the taxpayer.
So help me understand this. So currently at the Office of Community Care at many places, at many medical centers, I've heard that there may be appointments available inside the VA that could be offered to the veteran at a much shorter timeline, meaning that they could get in faster at the VA than they could in the community. But then that doesn't often happen, and often veterans are not offered the choice of going to the VA, even if it's a little longer, because VA has better outcomes on a particular specialty.
Sure, absolutely. Look, and I go back to the chairman's point that he made earlier. If this committee is truly committed on a bipartisan basis to improving the VA, and every single healthcare organization can improve, what it would focus on is making sure that it can increase efficiency, increase patient care, which both can happen at the same time, not on constantly figuring out ways to push veterans out of the institution.
I would be all in favor of DOJ looking at community care coordination operations within VA to make sure that the taxpayer is getting the best value. Sometimes the taxpayer will get much better value out of having the veteran actually be able to go and seek treatment inside the VA, and that if we adequately staffed the Office of Community Care, that this could all be done efficiently. We would see veterans getting their appointments, right? So does the Veterans Access Act do anything to improve manual processes that frequently lengthen the time it takes for a referral to be made?
No, look, and to your point, this is ultimately a detriment to the taxpayer, because all too often these options outside of the VA cost so much more, particularly with healthcare consolidation as it is today. This is something that DOJ should actually be opposed to, not in support of.
Well, thank you. My time has run out. I yield back.
Dr. Dechter, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Boss. Today, my Republican colleagues are pushing a proposal to expand for-profit care at the expense of our direct VA system. The data shows that VA healthcare consistently outperforms for-profit care in terms of quality and patient satisfaction. That alone should make us skeptical of this policy. But what makes this even more egregious is that they are pushing lower quality care at massive, unwarranted cost to American taxpayers. Just last week, the Office of the Inspector General issued a report indicating that the third-party administrators who run the for-profit VA care program were overpaid by almost $1 billion. And that those for-profit entities, predominantly Optum, are now refusing to return those overpayments to the VA. Congressman Rose, thank you for joining us. Since the passage of the VA Mission Act, VA's expenditures on for-profit care has dramatically climbed. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. In recent years, year-over-year growth in community care expenditure has been as high as 19%. And I bring this to show the vastly increasing proportion of community care versus indirect VA care, 2017 versus 2023. Congressman Rose, specialty providers in the community are not required to make quality of care data publicly available or report that data back to the VA. Is that accurate?
Absolutely.
Okay. It's also true that providers in the community are not required to provide real-time data on wait times to veterans. Is that accurate?
100%. We have no way when they seek privatized care to hold these institutions accountable or to have any centralized dashboard or metrics on a national basis.
So a veteran doesn't make an informed decision about whether to wait for VA, which they have a relatively reasonable understanding of the wait, versus a black box of going to the...
Right, and this is why I believe it should be the bipartisan prerogative of this committee to be opposed to any thinly veiled effort to privatize the VA, which is all this is. This is not an effort to improve patient care or save money.
I absolutely agree with you. Finally, providers in the community do not have to return medical records to the VA after they see a patient. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
I know this because I've been a VA provider in the VA, in the direct care system. I've trained VA doctors, and I've been a community care provider outside of the VA. And I've heard multiple times today, care in the community is VA care. I will tell you, as somebody who's delivered that care, that is absolutely not the case. I didn't have access to the medications patients were taking, their prior workup, and when I finished with them, I sent them back into a black box. It is absolutely a misappropriation of funds to do this work this way. So thank you, Congressman Rose, for your responses. As our VA system is robbed of funding that it desperately needs, this is a zero-sum game. We're not making the pie bigger. We need to serve our veterans. It's insane that we are discussing a proposal to increase poor care, disruptive care, and at the cost of what we know is data-driven, highly satisfactory care for our veterans. So I look forward to working with you, Congressman Rose, to ensure that every veteran in this country has access to care at a properly funded VA that allows them to receive the comprehensive and integrated care that they deserve. For us to continue this and move this bill forward is shameful. It is 100% prospectively investing in community care that undermines veterans' care. And I thank you for this time. I yield back.
Thank you. Ranking Member, do you have any closing remarks?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to request unanimous consent to enter 4 items into the record. I have, let me get the list. I have 2 items, excuse me. I have letters from Everytown Gun Safety and the Fraternal Order of Police to be entered into the record.
So,
Yes,
without objection?
Yes, thank you. You want final comments? Or?
Yeah, fine.
Let me say, Mr. Chairman, I do hope that we can have a hearing specifically on the topic of the unfairly dismissed employees from VA, especially the veterans who had stellar performance reviews, but yet were still dismissed. I don't think it's adequate that you've invited them to come speak with you personally. I do think the American people want to know what happened and hold whoever made this decision, because Ms. Sterrett was not able to tell me who ordered her to issue that memorandum, which fired every employee, nor was she able to deal with this contradiction that in her memo that people were fired for their performance, but clearly we know that we have employees who had stellar performance records. Let me say that I appreciate the testimony of the panel today. Mr. Murray, I didn't ask you many questions, but I certainly appreciated what the VFW's views on many sections of the Access Act, and that you, like I, and the VFW, and my views about the adequate balance of the proper balance between community care and direct care. Well, I would just say it's really about for-profit care and direct care within the VA. I just want to make sure that we're not summarily putting out, referring into the private sector care that diminishes VA's ability to offer direct care. 90% of the veterans are getting their care. 90% of the veterans who are enrolled in VA are getting their care through direct care, and we don't want to see that that diminished by the trend that was shown by my colleague from Oregon. So with that, I yield back and look forward to working with you on a future hearing.
And I thank you, and we'll take everything you said under advisement. I think that it's vitally important that we do recognize that just a few weeks ago in a hearing, that GAO noted that 42% of the care, which is given by the community, is done for 25% of the cost. That's important, and that's why we should continue the discussion, not in any way, shape, or form to privatize. I've said that. But it is important that the veteran remember, and I've said it so many times, and I've said it so many times today, the VA was created for the veteran, not for the VA. Who are we serving? Are we serving the bureaucrats at the VA? Or are we serving the veterans? And I believe my constituents, even though I have a VA right down the road from me, I believe a majority of my constituents believe we are to serve our veterans. With that, I want to thank all of our witnesses for being here. I look forward to addressing the problems that these bills would fix to provide solutions for our nation's veterans and their families. And I will continue to push VA to strive for world-class care and know it is capable of providing that for veterans. Under my leadership, we will continue to work to ensure VA has the best in-class workforce to deliver care and benefits. And we will hold them accountable when they miss the mark. As chairman, I will always put veterans first, and they should never feel fearful of losing their constitutional rights when they visit VA. With that, I ask unanimous consent that all members shall have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include any extenuous material. Hearing no objections so ordered, the hearing is now adjourned.